To another episode of Justin the Food Entrepreneur Show. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host. That's BIZZARRO. For anyone who's out there, you can find us on Instagram at Justin the Food Entrepreneurs or at Justin Bizzarro. We haven't been doing a lot on social media right now as we're relaunching, but thank you guys. I appreciate all of you, all the reaching out, all the questions, all the concerns, all the follows, all the likes, all the streams. It means a lot all over the world. It's kind of crazy how many out there are interested in food and being food entrepreneurs in some capacity. So that's pretty interesting. With that being said, I have Barry Levine with us from from the law practice of Barry Levine, or law office, excuse me. Also author of Bankruptcy Through the Looking Glass, and with a podcast by the same name, Bankruptcy Through the Looking Glass as well. Barry's from Beverly, Massachusetts, everyone. So welcome, Barry. How are you doing today?
Good morning. It's Friday, right? A beautiful day up here in Massachusetts. But to make things clear, I only live in Massachusetts. I'm originally from Brooklyn. So it makes a difference to people out there. So you'll tell it in my accent.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, Barry. I
Sure.
want to, yeah, I mean, becoming a lawyer, becoming a bankruptcy lawyer, it's a journey. It's a task, and in a time where things weren't as easy as they are to obtain for sure. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about little Barry growing up in New York and then achieving what you have, because I think let's anchor this. Being a lawyer, number one, and the degrees that are required in this study, obviously, it's a lot. But more than that, being able to start your own business and carry a law practice forward, it is a business, just so everyone's aware. They do run like businesses,
That's true.
and contrary to what everyone thinks. And that does say a lot. So the floor is yours, Barry. I'm giving it to you.
Sure.
Let's hear about little Barry up to big Barry.
Well, I tell you, nowadays I just tell people I'm an old hippie who happens to practice law.
Yeah,
Uh, I have a nice glass pipe collection on my desk when people come in. And how I decided to become a lawyer.
I see the Grateful Dead in the background. I think
Yeah,
that's there.
Grateful Dead, a lot of posters and
I
stuff.
love it. Love it.
I would point out my Quaalude jar, but nobody needs to know about that. It is empty, everyone, unfortunately. But growing up in Brooklyn, my uncles were all lawyers, and they got me interested in practicing law. One of them used to prosecute murder cases in the Brooklyn's DA's office. And through that, I always wanted to be a lawyer. At one point in my life, some mischievous reason, I was going to become a dentist, and I went through the fetal pig and all that, and biology and chemistry wasn't for me. And so I became a lawyer. And when I was in law school, I got a job with a guy who did debtors work. He had a very busy debtors practice, businesses mostly, a lot of bankruptcies too. And all of the creditors' attorneys in the area hated him. And that's where I learned all this stuff from. I worked for him. Basically, I ran the practice and he wrote books. He'd go to Florida, write a book. I'd be running the practice. And, you mentioned it's law practice is a business. So after 5 years of hearing Barry, one day this will all be yours. I decided to pick up and I opened up my own office up in little south of here in Lynn and took most of his practice with me because the clients knew I was doing all the work.
Wow.
That I was thrown into doing Chapter 11s and, out of court reorganizations and dealing with creditors. I wasn't even in law school. I was dealing with stuff like that. And, since then, that's what I've been doing.
Let's talk about this a little bit, because I think from a legal perspective, business law is different than personal law or the individual law, and you're dealing with bankruptcy, but maybe it's the same as an individual goes through bankruptcy as a business. I'm not sure, since businesses tend to be seen that way. But let's talk about this a little bit, because it is different. You are managing it from a business standpoint. It's not just a normal legal process when you go through a bankruptcy. It's possibly dismantling a business. It's dealing with the business in its worst scenario, honestly. And I don't think it gets worse than that, for anyone in that scenario, and it has to be dealt with. That's just the way it is legally. People need to be made right, and things happen, and there's a reason bankruptcy exists, because they do happen, and sometimes,
Well, you
uh,
point out the food business, to
yeah,
me, that's a classic case of,
yeah,
bankruptcies.
yeah,
The little pizza shop on the corner that's been 8 pizza shops before it, and each one has failed, and the ninth will open up and try to make a go of it. It's a very difficult business. You know, I grew up with a friend of mine. He worked in a deli in Canarsie, slicing corned beef and pastrami. He wanted to open up a restaurant. You got the guy who thinks running a restaurant is sitting at the front door with a martini in your hand,
yeah,
saying hello to the guests.
yeah,
It's a tough business. And actually, over the decades, they've been a lot of I've represented a lot of failing or failed restaurants. Um, and the thing about if they go through a Chapter 11, which is trying to reorganize them, it's very difficult. 9 out of 10 Chapter 11s, even if they get confirmed, don't survive their first year. And the restaurant business in particular is particularly fickle. People know you're in a Chapter 11 or something like that. The customers stop coming. It's not good.
yeah,
S and but yet, on the other side of the food business, there are optimists out there, and they're gonna, even though this place failed 12 times, they're the 13th is gonna open up there.
yeah. That's true. One of the things I find interesting about this topic in particular is the insanity thing. Thinking I can do it, keep doing it, or I'm just going to do it better than the next person. And people rush into stuff. I think a lot of preemptiveness in the food business to running into a Chapter 11, Chapter um, 7 scenario or whatever they run into. I think someone probably are just so bad shape they just go under. I don't know, in the restaurants.
Well, sometimes it's
And
not meant to be.
yeah, but I think a lot of it has to do with, we have this tendency to rush at the beginning, because we need the money and we need to get it done and we need to turn a profit and we need to get the doors open, and we start cutting a lot of corners, and those are the same corners the people before you have cut, just so everyone's aware. All you're doing is putting yourself in a category with the people that have followed the same path and failed. It's not that trying failed, it's that cutting corners failed because we rush at the beginning. We maybe cut price, or we don't handle things with the employees properly, or whatever it is, but we start to let little things go, and we don't hold standards at the beginning because we're so pressed for money, and we focus on the money, and instead of the business. And the very thing that happens when you focus on the money, interestingly, as an entrepreneur, is that it's the thing that'll make or break you because you're so focused on it. And the thing that should be making or breaking on you is your service, your employees, your staff, or whatever, and your planning. So, you know, jumping into a business, I think everyone wants to do it, and there's a dream there, how great it would be to have everyone eating at your restaurant, but that also means 3 a.m. mornings. That means if the restaurant closes at 10, you're possibly there prepping and training a prep staff for the next day until 3 a.m., not to mention porters, cleanup, all the staff that has to do that. So, in the food world, it is 24/7, whether we like it or not. And I think that we have to be prepared for that. And then I'll say this, just from my perspective, I want this your show, Barry, but most humans don't have the capacity. No different than building a muscle and doing the reps, and doing your curls so you have a bicep. Being in the food business takes a certain amount of capacity for life and a certain amount of capacity to generate your own energy over long periods of days, 16-hour days, 20-hour days, regardless of if you're in consumer packaged goods or you're in whatever. The reason being is the food industry has the most entrepreneurs in the world. I talk about this all the time. It is the most highly competitive also because of that, because every person that cooks in their kitchen or has their mother's recipe thinks they have a brilliant thing. So the difference, particularly in food, is not a good idea. There's lots of good ideas, lots of great recipes out there. It's the individual's ability and determination and strategic planning to weather the long run. Can I weather this? Am I willing to work 2 jobs? Am I willing to work 3 jobs? Am I willing to put the money into my business when it's losing money? Have I had that conversation with my wife or my husband that when the business is going bad, we need to actually live off of 25% of our income because I'm going to need 75% of our income to keep the business alive. That's real conversation. And real conversation is your business will go bankrupt if you don't plan and you don't hold on to cash and you don't preserve the customers and you don't build a long-term relationship with every single person you do business with. The reason people bounce back from bankruptcies and people reinvest in them is because they see the human learning the lesson and they see how that human handled things on the way down and the way they handled the people in the situation and the integrity and honesty they use. That's why people get second chances, in my opinion, anyway, at least from my perspective. But anyway, it's your show, Barry. I just want to anchor that for everyone because I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I do want to be realistic
Oh,
about.
that's the reality of the restaurant business. It's,
Yeah.
for everybody who wants to get into it, one maybe less.
Yeah. So it's long term suffering for
Well,
sure.
no, I mean, the thing is, given that entrepreneurs are usually optimistic, which is a trait that I've never had, uh, that, this, so first they get the money to open up the business, then the business has problems, and then they borrow the money from their family to keep the business running, and nothing particularly changes. And the next thing, they're collecting meals tax, or if they have employees, they're, collecting withholding. And listen, you're supposed to pay that to the government, but nobody's standing there with a gun. So that's the next thing they start using to keep the business afloat. And the problem is that sometimes you have, like I said before, it's not meant to be. You can't continue to throw money into the business and hope it's going to change, and 30 days later nothing changes, and there's no more money to throw into it. Sometimes you have to realize that it's time to cut your losses and shut the doors. But many people, especially entrepreneurial types, tomorrow's going to be a better day.
No, I will say the most entrepreneurs, I'll call it an amateur entrepreneur just because I want to just put it at a level. I think money is always the solution. And it's a weird mindset. I need more money. I need to borrow more money. If I just
Right.
had more money, this would work. If I just had more money, this would work. No, it's not working. It doesn't matter how much fucking money, excuse my language, you put
That's
into
okay. You're right.
and I try not to curse on the show, so this is probably the first time I've cursed in, like, I don't know how many episodes, but I did because I can't
Because the Brooklyn
understand it.
boys, yeah.
The more money you put into it doesn't make the problem any better. It just makes the problem bigger
Well,
because you're not fixing whatever's not making it
I I
successful in
I
the
can
first
I
place.
can give you an example. It's not the
Yeah.
food business, but it's a person's mindset.
Yeah, it's mindset.
A guy, 3 partners were in the HVAC business, 2 brothers and a third partner. They owed the IRS 60 grand for unpaid withholding. And in the scheme of things, that's one of the easiest debts to deal with in a Chapter 11. Basically, you can pay them out over 5 years, and their interest rate is, I don't know if it's still the same, but it used to be prime plus 2.5, which is better than going to a bank.
Yes, way better.
So I met with the 2 brothers. I said, "Listen, this is what you gotta do." They went back to the third partner. The third partner said, "Well, I got some money in my house." Borrowed the 60 grand to pay off the IRS. I put them in my calendar for about 6 months later, but they came back a year later. And guess what? They had the same problem. 60 grand, 70 grand they owed the IRS. Same spiel again. File a Chapter 11. It's the best way to deal with it. The third partner, who still couldn't be bothered to come to the meeting, said no. He had equity in his house, paid off the IRS. They came back 6 months later. Now they owed 100 grand to the IRS. We had no choice but to file a Chapter 11 because he had no money in his house anymore.
Yeah.
and they lost the business, and he ultimately lost his house. Had he looked at it a little bit differently before he ignored me, what would I know? I got my Google law degree. Uh, he could have still had the equity in his house, probably paid the IRS because they had no real other debt, and still being in business maybe. But no,
Mm.
everybody figures they're an optimist. It's going to turn around.
Yeah, and that's the thing is if you're doing it and you're in the habit of doing it, you better break the habit. Like I don't know how to say it to anyone. I've seen it, I've witnessed it, I've been a part of it. So it's not like I'm not saying this from experience. When you've been around and an entrepreneur for 20 plus years and you've also somewhat worked for others in the meantime, trying to keep businesses alive, you are a part of things. And even sometimes having to do it yourself or go through a bankruptcy because you made poor decisions, or what's even worse in the contract food business is you all of a sudden have a bunch of people that are doing business with Walmart, and all of a sudden their business goes down the tube, and you have 7 clients and a warehouse full of product in Georgia, and they can't pay their $1 million bill each. That's $7 million if you have 7 of them during a situation like that. But it does happen, so everyone's aware. Everyone thinks Walmart and on if we're going to talk about consumer packaged good, because I think this is important and why I want to do the episode is to talk about this, how to avoid this, because so many people this happens. Oh, my recipe is doing well. Walmart's going to take me on. I just need to have the volume. Yeah, but if Walmart doesn't sell the volume, you still own it. They don't buy it from you.
Well, along those lines, a client of mine was selling some puzzle,
Yeah.
like for $300. Some The Today Show has some entrepreneurial thing where they do advertising for you, and he thought they had guaranteed him a certain amount of sales. So he bought 10,000 units of the puzzle, only 3,000 units sold, and my friend the auctioneer tried to get rid of the puzzles for him because the business went out and he had to file a bankruptcy because there was no guarantee, and he used his credit cards to buy all the inventory. It's crazy. You can't do shit like that.
Again, but and these are the things that I just these are shortcuts, Scott, that I talk about as an entrepreneur. Or you want to talk about it as an attorney? Let's talk about it. I'm going to just draw the parallels here. We just talked about Barry doing the job before he ever had the degree. Okay, he had to do the work. He had to do the work, and he had to do it for someone else, and he had to do it for his uncle who was off getting all the glory while he was getting none in order for Barry to one day have his own law firm. Okay, so let's just anchor that for the audience. But when we have a brilliant idea, and 1 year later, there's this person, all I have to do is invest $300,000 or 3 million or whatever I need to just get them happy. No problem. I'll leverage my house and I won't tell the co-packer what's really going on. I'll say the business is sold, and then I'll put the co-packer in a bad situation. So they might be in a Chapter 11 situation because I didn't wasn't honest with them. But this goes on and on and on because of the optimist. It's important to be an optimist. It's also important to be a realist. 1 foot on the ground at all times, as they say,
Oh,
no matter how high your head is in the clouds.
the other
And
thing
so,
people
go
should
ahead.
do is they should analyze before they go into any business their downside. If you have equity in a house, figure out maybe do something else with the equity because you have to look at it as when you're going into business, even if you have debt, you're in a war with your creditors.
Yeah.
And if there's nothing for them to get, then you're in the best position. And the problem with people is rather than looking at their situation before they go into the business, the shit has now hit the fan. We want to do this, that, and the other thing. Well, it's a little too late. You can do it. It's a fraudulent conveyance and all this other stuff. If you prepare it like, when people go into, especially the restaurant business, they'll borrow money from family, friends, and all that to prepare for the worst. The best is to grant your family and friends mortgages, security interest on the assets of the business. They may not be in a prior. Maybe you had bank financing and the bank is first, but they'll be behind the bank and you maintain a certain bit of control because you have a friendly party as a secured creditor. Again, if the shit hits the fan,
Agreed.
you have to, uh, you have to really think about, okay, if the restaurant fails, what am I going to lose? Many decades ago when I had a lot more hair on the top of my head, and I had a beard like you, uh, you could get a loan from a bank without
Yep.
having personal guarantee. Well, that ended like 25, 30 years ago. So the real question when they want your personal guarantee and what you have to think about is whether or not they want your personal guarantee to be secured by a mortgage on your house. It gives you flexibility. A lot of your people in the food business may have experience with how the SBA dealt with things during COVID.
Yep.
The SBA was very nice to a lot of businesses and lent out a lot of money. And what's been happening now, I find, is keep saying not meant to be. A lot of those businesses with the money were able to get through COVID, but no more. And, oftentimes, and what people don't realize is that an SBA guarantee can be discharged in a bankruptcy. It's not like the IRS. But oftentimes, they'll secure your guarantee with a mortgage on your house. Second mortgage, probably after your first mortgage, but it gives them a little more leverage against you and sort of precludes you from doing anything. Whereas if you have an unsecured personal guarantee, you can file a bankruptcy and it's gone. If they have a mortgage on your house, mortgage is a mortgage. You have to deal with it.
Yeah, I just one that it's interesting. I have a much different perspective of this with age, and borrowing money and how it works in contract food and the amount of size of our contracts, you had no choice but to borrow money from the bank. No one just has that money sitting around or $27 million to start the New York City project. Um, and needing how many contracts in place to guarantee that and personal guarantees to do that. And that was 2001, 2000, somewhere around there. So before personal guarantees were really pushed, unless it was big numbers. But I want to emphasize this because from the food perspective, from a little guy perspective, um, the best way to avoid this, I don't know how to explain this to anyone, but you need to be able to self-finance your business at the beginning through what I would call a cash flow process. And during that process, you need to be able to build the capacity to then run your business. Okay. And that's why this is important. This is why I anchor capacity at the beginning for everyone, because I've thought about this a long time in my own experience. Okay. And how not to make the same mistakes myself or as I coach or consult or build my own businesses or and relaunch food service partners businesses. What did I do wrong and how do I do it better? Well, one of the things that I will say, capacity is important. You have to build this capacity to work long hours and not be stressed about it. It means you also need to balance physical, spiritual, mental, emotional. Okay. How do we do that? Well, not everything's work. It means you need to go put on a weight vest maybe and walk 45 minutes, or you need to go to the gym for 20 minutes or whatever it is, because you need to be able to move your brain in a different way and step away from your situation to think about it in an environment that excels you. Okay. So if you're not putting yourself in these habits already, am I reading? Am I working out? Am I working on the business? Am I making sure my relationship with my family is okay or my kids? Or my future family. Okay, if you don't have one now, but you're planning on getting married while you're being an entrepreneur, you better figure out that space now because you're not going to figure out later because right now you're building. Okay. The other part is you need to figure out how to work outside your business to have constant capital going into your business, whatever your profession is. And then you need to be able to have the time and dedication to work on your business. So, what does that mean? If you cannot work a minimum of 80 hours per week, you should not be an entrepreneur, period. And I know everyone's like, oh, well, five 20-hour work week and all those things. The dude wrote a book and lived off of it. That's an anomaly. Okay. Let's not talk about him as the example. Okay. He's an anomaly. What we're talking about is what does it take for a human being to achieve long term excellence and success over the longevity of their life as an entrepreneur? In order to do that, you need to be able to understand, you need to self fund. Why? Because when shit hits the fan, second curse of this one, you need to be able to know that you can go get a job, you can go work, you can go support your family, you can go do whatever you do and put money into your business and run your business. What does that mean also? I need to, from day one, train the individuals that are going to run my business in my absence. Period. The business from day one should run without me there. I don't want it to because I need to be there and lead, but it should be able to. Okay. That's the other part. I need to be able to step away and capitalize my business without borrowing the money. I need to be able to work on my business when I'm not capitalizing on it by leading those in it. And I should never have to lead my own business. I should always have the individuals in there that are leading, and I'm just behind the circus cleaning up the elephant shit. Number three, cuss for everyone for the record, because that's the point. Okay. A leader does not actually lead from the front, even though we think we do. We set the pace, the direction, and then we get behind and we figure out what's going wrong. Because if you're not behind and you're not figuring out what's going wrong, you're never going to fix your problem. If you're always in the front, all you're doing is leading, you're never seeing the problems. And that's why this is important. When you step out and you work on making sure, okay, I'm going to make this amount of income. I'm going to put X away for my family, X away for the business. The business will always have this money coming in, no matter how well the business is doing. And that's the way to start it until the business is making so much cash that it's stacking in the bank. Okay. If the money's not stacking in the bank, you need to figure out how to constantly capitalize your business. Even if you're not, put the work, put the money into the business, stack the cash in there, form another LLC that you're stacking the money in, that then becomes the loan entity to your business when you need the money. Whatever it is, well, however you want to do it from a legal standpoint, I recommend the latter because then it's in another place and you can invest it into the business or back into yourself if you wanted to, or buy a house through that entity, whatever it is. But that's, you need to buffer yourself between the layers. And when you consolidate your businesses too much, I've done this where I had my business very protected and then I consolidated them too much because that's what everyone said would be the right thing to do for tax complication. But you expose yourself to every problem under one thing. And so you may have to pay more things or worry about more businesses or pay your accountant to do more taxes or pay your lawyer to draw more legal documents. But at the end of the day, it will save you in the long run. Why? Because I can sell off pieces of my business. I can bankrupt pieces of my businesses. I can get rid of pieces of my businesses if they don't make sense. But if they're all tied into one, that cancer spreads through one versus the individual outside. So, okay, how do I do that, everyone? I break my businesses into pieces. I become my own supplier of bread. I become my own supplier of sauces. I become my own supplier of spices. And then I have it supply the business. And therefore, the money's trickling and there's little bits of profit that are going into the pots that are there to protect me. Okay. That's how strategically it works. You got to figure out how to capture the pennies as they're going out the door and keeping them in your pocket. Okay, that's, you need to capitalize. You need to make sure, because when you're in capitalized mode, you know how much money it's taking to run your business. Then you know how much money is going out of your business. So then you do cost accounting. Okay, every penny of your business should be broken down before you ever open the business. You should know where it is. You should know how much you need to capitalize. You should know your break even, to Barry's point. You should know what it looks like if you're at zero. How much money do you need to take out of your house? How much money do you need to capitalize? What does it look like if you run on a minimum amount of employees, minimum amount of power, minimum amount of water? Those are all questions that you need to ask. Okay. And I know no one wants to be a doomsday person when you're opening a business. I'm going to let Barry talk, I promise everyone. But I'm going to anchor this because of athletes and being in that world also. The best athletes in the world do not think about visualization. Everyone says that. That's common right now. What the best athletes do in the world is they get rid of all the negative in their head first. The worst case scenario is I missed the shot. I broke my ankle. My knee got busted. They get rid of all the fear in their head before they go win the game in their head. Why? Because when you get rid of all the fear and you address all the fear, you naturally put in the mind all those scenarios and prepare for those scenarios if they ever happen. You are getting an advantage over your competition in sport. The same is true in business. Okay. If I know my vulnerabilities, if I know where things are going wrong, if I go to other pizza places and I study other pizza guys and I learn what's the problems they have before I go do it on my own, if I become a student before I become a teacher, there's a lot there, guys. It avoid a lot. I mean, it might put Barry out of business, my advice, but
Never.
that yeah, exactly. People don't listen. And so it's the part about it is it's more than just the willingness to start the business. There is that, but I think as you probably know in your own personal experience in life, Barry, um, being prepared is more important than the opportunity in a lot of cases.
Well, I'm somebody who does a very good job for my clients, but my philosophy, if it's good enough for jazz, it's good enough for me. So, it's gotten me this far. The other one, you mentioned well, your mother was named Levine. I've been called a schwer Arbeiter, which means somebody who doesn't really like to work a lot. But I appreciate the good example to me of an entrepreneur is I've done bankruptcies for some people 4 or 5 times, you
Yeah,
know. They've been in business, one business goes out, they come up with another idea, open up another business, doesn't work out, start another one.
yeah,
It's but you're giving your listeners very good advice because, again, it's like the person who opens up a pizza place, like we were saying, and decides to open 5 of them, and each one is under the same corporate umbrella, and 2 of the 3 are fumphering along and don't survive, and you need to close them. You can't distinguish. It makes it a problem. It's the same way, I remember when I was in law school, he was the dean of the dean of the school, taught contracts. He didn't believe in corporations. This was before LLCs were really popular. And it's
yeah, I
like,
get it.
how could you not believe in a corporation? Because when I have people today, you have Meshuggahs who run a business as a DBA, and they'll have a house with a lot of equity. Fortunately, in a state like Massachusetts, we have one of the best homestead uh, uh, acts in the country. It protects up to $1 million of equity in a house if you go bankrupt. But when you're a sole proprietor and there's exposed equity, you have assets in something else and you're having business problems, I can't distinguish between you and your personal stuff. It's one and
Yeah,
the same. And people persist. And it's the same thing. People like LLCs because it enables them to take the income, at a lesser tax rate. Most people, however, see again, like you're an optimist, I'm a pessimist. I look at the downside.
yeah,
Most people who use an LLC generally put it as a Schedule C to their personal income tax, right? And now you have a company that owes withholding or meals tax or sales tax. And if your listeners don't know, they're called trust fund taxes, and you're personally liable for those. You
yeah,
get a bit of a discount on the IRS, not in most states on this. But anyway, by putting your LLC as on your personal income tax, they don't have to go through the assessment process. Whereas if you have a separate LLC that files its own tax return, or like when you have a corporation and you haven't paid the trust fund taxes, they have to assess you personally. Granted, you're the president, you're going to get assessed. But when you owe money, it's always a question of, for lack of a better word, jerking your creditors around. You're looking to buy time all the time. And
exactly.
why agree to be assessed right away? Because now they can go after you. Play the process along. I have a very nice letter that I sent out for the clients. I couldn't send it out because it was all bullshit, but, that they're not responsible even though they signed all the checks and the president and all this stuff. They're gonna be assessed, but why agree to something? Again, it buys you time. That's what
Yeah,
in a financially troubled that's what you wanna do. I mean,
yeah,
you're looking to take a
exactly.
step back and a step to the side.
Yeah, and I think even in the best case scenarios, and people that do still go through bankruptcy, if they're able to buy themselves time or they're able to do things, there's they can start to figure things out and maybe recover. But there's a lot of self-reflection that needs to happen. And
You're right.
I often hear this, especially now, if I just had more money or if I could just get a loan or Justin, could you just help me out with more money? But the answer is never that. That's a first turnoff for me, if I were to be honest. If that's your approach to me or to any investor, most of them are going to say no. I will be honest with
Oh,
you,
you're
just
like
because
sinking money into a black hole.
yeah, because there's the needing more and we're doing well, and there has to be a lot of change and a lot of reflection and a lot of ability to grow because no entrepreneur that I know of, their original idea is the idea they're at now. I just don't know it. And the superstar of your show generally comes later. McDonald's didn't invent the Big Mac until when? The Chicken McNugget didn't come until 1980, and now everyone eats McNuggets. Okay, so just think about it. We didn't even have something called sweet and sour sauce, or didn't even know what it was till McDonald's introduced it. Okay, let's start going even further. Buffalo sauce didn't become worldwide until the 90s. Okay, Nashville hot sauce 2000s. Okay, these are little things that no one knew about, okay? They don't matter, but now they matter because we liked it. They were little stars that didn't become stars until generations later, and then we have things that were invented to be stars, okay? And just so I wanna anchor this as my last point for everyone, or my last main point overall to put this all together. We talked about HR and taxes and employee and labor taxes, okay? As an entrepreneur in the food business, trying to worry about the customers, the vendors, we deal with more SKUs than anyone else because recipes are complex. Just look at a Chinese restaurant and how many ingredients they have. And then and forget about hospitals and everything else about all the different ingredients they have because of all the different diets and allergen restrictions. And so you're talking about very complex things. The last thing we should be doing is managing the HR. I'm just going to be honest with you. It is not meant for an entrepreneur to do. It is meant for an entrepreneur to delegate. Okay. Because we need to lead no different than a coach leads a team. And then there's, an infrastructure of a corporation that determines who's traded and who's moved. It's not the actual coach who gets to decide it because if they thought the coach was cutting them, really, it'd be a different conversation. Yeah, the corporation gets them to the practice, then the coach cuts them from the initial that are there, but the corporation is generally doing the trading and the selling and whatever, just whatever. So we're looking at a dynamic here. In the dynamic of HR, because of the tendency to cut corners when paying HR taxes, when offering medical and dental and all the right things you should do. As an entrepreneur, if you're starting a restaurant or a food business and you're going to have employees, you need to look at outsourcing your HR first.
You know, one
Hire a company that does it.
one
And
thing
pay
to
the bills
consider
and understand what that bill is from day one and just build it into your costs. Don't ever get away from it. That's my advice. But anyway, go ahead, Barry.
one thing to consider, is leasing your employees.
Yeah.
So then instead of worrying about the taxes, you mentioned you get one bill every month, you pay the bill, they pay everything else. You don't
Yeah.
have that withholding or issues like that. It sometimes makes life a little bit easier.
Yeah, we do that in hotels, the contract labor, especially because it's just easier from a payroll incentive in the smaller hotels to keep track of one bill, or if it's
Yeah.
two contract companies, two bills versus trying to do all the payroll for those smaller hotels, especially when turnover is so high. Turnover is high, you have to do all that paperwork over and over and over again. Just hire a company, guys, especially at the beginning. That's what I'm saying. You're gonna turn over people at the beginning. Have a company that can help you with it. You don't wanna be bogged down dealing with the turnover of employees and whether or not they're doing their job or not. It should be a yes or no answer. And in Barry's example, least labor is they're not working, send someone else tomorrow. Period. Period. And I don't, people aren't necessarily expendable, but people are expendable. Okay. And you don't want to go bankrupt because you're too nice. That's a bad thing. Okay, being too nice is not a good thing. You can be a good man and a good woman, and you can be good humans and take care of people and build jobs that sustain people in the long run. But you can't do that if you're too nice in the short run. That's my advice. And in HR, most of us have never stepped foot in the HR department. Okay. No one knows the rules and the ups and downs and little idiosyncrasies when you're starting a business. And I will tell you, I know a lot of people that built 10, 12 restaurants and then ran into an HR problem and lost every one of them except for one or all of them, period, because they got sued or they ran into an issue or they didn't handle an HR thing properly or whatever. And they gave an employee the upper hand unintentionally.
Well, when you reach a certain point of size, you need to have an employee handbook that you get out
Exactly.
and sign off on, which
Yeah.
explain this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, listen, it's a very litigious society nowadays, and people have been taught to believe that, well, if it's covered by insurance, there's got to be a deep pocket. So who cares? Let me sue. You know,
Yeah, exactly.
and I
I
will
know, I
say
used to laugh. I used to laugh because anytime it would be brought up, the insurance company on our side, we just give them 250,000. We just joke around, "Oh, just give them 250."
but you want to know
Because
something?
it's like that was the blanket answer from the insurance companies, just give them $250,000 no matter
You know
what it
what?
was,
That
that was the
that
settlement amount.
that doesn't happen. I don't do that kind of work, but it doesn't happen anymore. I mean,
Oh, that's
to
good.
give you a good example, when I was a young lawyer, we did very little, like no negligence work. An elderly woman, and I called up the insurance company. She had fallen over something in a friend's apartment. And I called up the insurance company because we couldn't find had no contact information for the client. And the guy gets on the phone with me, and the next thing I know, he's offering me $90,000. And I gave it, if you deal with lawyers, give me a second, I'll call you back. I have to talk to my client. Didn't know where the client was. We accepted 110, found the client, she got her money.
Yeah,
But they don't do that so much anymore.
that's too
Yeah, and
bad
now
for
they
them.
if I had a recent case where the guy had workman's comp and they denied coverage.
Interesting.
It's tough out there.
Yeah.
It's you know, eh, you're finding that more and more, I don't know if other states have like Massachusetts has, uh, with respect to liquor deliveries.
Yes.
You probably know if you get on the shit list, you're COD, and then if you wanna sell the business, you have to get all the creditors, all the liquor suppliers paid, which sometimes is easier said than done.
Yeah, of course.
And it just makes it, I don't know if other pla and then on the other hand, liquor licenses in Massachusetts can sell for 250,000.
Yeah.
But they all these arcane laws especially if you're an entrepreneur, you wanna cook, you wanna do this, that, and the other thing, you don't wanna deal with all this collateral mishegas, this
Yeah.
minute trivia, if you will. I don't like to deal with it. When you do bankruptcy work, there's a lot of they have to provide documents and things like that. And, fortunately for me, I have a very good assistant, and there's a portal that they can upload documents to. But, it's like looking at a tax return. When I
Yeah.
signed up for the tax code in law school, I looked at those three small, big books with the very little print and said, that's why God created accountants and
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
Well, I mean, and if I were gonna really argue anything in the world, I'm pretty sure accounting was the first profession in the world, counting humans, counting our food, counting what we gather, because anything we've made that complicated over hundreds of thousands of years of human existence, however long it's been, is definitely a profession that's been around a long time because to me, it's just counting, but we've made it so complicated, but there's reason for it.
Well,
Human
no,
hu
you probably read the stories about going back to ancient Sumer. They have, like, invoices for deliveries and
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's
Yeah, the first written tablets are not anything we were like, "Oh, it's God, and
sa
it's whatever." No, no.
same thing.
It's counting their inventory and s so they
Well,
can survive the winter.
did you ever read the book, Canticle for Leibowitz?
No, no, I will read it, though. I'm a
It's
reader for sure.
science fiction, and after a nuclear everything's devastated, there's like a religion, and they found a his list, and it had half a pound of corned beef, rye bread, quarter pound of pastrami, something, and they made a religion out of it.
Yeah.
Great, great book.
But I mean, it's kind of funny because it when I and I've done seminary work and I've studied all the ancient history and all that, but when you really go back and look at it, a lot of it is jumbled into accounting. How many humans are moving,
N
tax collection, uh
Nothing changes.
and the Roman army or even Genghis Khan or Alexander, everything was so I mean, the library, Alexandria that burned down, one of the Alexandrias, the reason that it was so significant because these guys collected things and they saw things from a human standpoint that we're thinking of greatness as in greatness of conquering, but the greatness was their ability to account for everything. If
Yeah.
you were to
Well,
be
no, one thing we haven't really got into, it's like, what we do oftentimes if a business has trouble in Massachusetts, we will liquidate the business, have its assets appraised, set up a new business, and sell it back. A little more complicated than that,
I like it. That's my kinda level of business right there.
and
You wanna come
and and well, that's what we, for lack of a better word, we used to call them dump buybacks.
Yeah, yeah. I love it.
Be and I remember talking years when I was a new lawyer, talking to one of my uncles, nothing new in the world. He was doing the same deals in New York in the '40s, and this was like, 40 years later. But it is, interesting way to get out of debt and keep going. But, oftentimes, getting back to the guy I learned all this stuff from, he was the only one that made money because eventually he would liquidate a business, sell it to a new business, it would fail, he'd liquidate it again. The time, it didn't survive, but he got paid a fee for every one of those deals.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I mean, it's not no one wants to hear this, and I was in the hospital business during COVID, so everyone's aware. If I'm a warmonger, I will say this. Um, but there's people needed in every level, and the best of the best build long-term relationships. And even what we just heard, okay, the person's going to continue going, or the business is going to go. That's a human that's there doing the best they can
Well,
for the
and
long term.
in that situation, as you say that, we always encourage the debtor going forward to do business with their same suppliers because,
Yeah,
I was in business for 10 years. You may be taking a hit now, but you're going to make another, hopefully, 10 years worth of money from me going forward instead of burning all their bridges and starting again. It's,
yeah.
people happy.
Yeah, and I've been through something like that where we acquired a business that was in just an asset deal and we bought all the assets, but then we continued to work with the suppliers and actually, even though we didn't acquire the debt, we paid the debt to them over time. We just made a long-term deal in order to keep the relationship going, so paid others' debts. But I do find in business, if you do that, if you are getting companies out of bankruptcy or you are investing in companies or acquiring companies that you look at the deals in similar ways and building the relationships that you shouldn't be a savior. You can't fix anything overnight. No one can. But you can have a plan in the long run and do things where, okay, it's not my debt, but I can do right by you. I'll still do business with you and I'll give up some of my profits so you recover yours so we have a long term relationship. And I think that that's the way to do business, and it's abnormal now. Anyone who's out there, I don't know what it is, but we don't give a crap about our suppliers, our vendors, our employees. It's kind of weird. very automated. I know AI is taking a lot of that relationship away, or digital is taking a lot of that relationship away, but it's still important from an entrepreneur, I would say. And if you want your business to survive in the long run, I don't know. Restaurants have been around for thousands of years at this point. The model's still the same. Serve good food, have good service, and make sure everyone's treated properly and listen to your customers. And if you're struggling, change and
But
hustle and change the
aren't the
business.
restaurants having a price point problem now? I mean,
Yeah.
there was just, an article in today's Boston Globe about the cost of a lobster roll, and I went the
I love this topic. I'm glad you brought it up. Go ahead.
client took me out, this place is called, Row 34, a high-end fish place in
Yeah.
Boston. The lobster roll was 62 bucks. He almost plotzed. And that's what the article was saying, is that they're finding it's reaching a price point where people aren't willing to buy it. But that's the price of lobster. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, and other than abnormalities, which we have a lot in milk and eggs and beef and pork, and now in lobster, actually, and there's some other industries that are suffering from it. What I would call extreme inflation or deflation of price, the price index for those items. However, I'm going to say this because I this is a shame on us as a food industry, shame on all of us as entrepreneurs and owners. uh, you should always adjust your prices quarterly as a business, and you should always adjust them, and get your customers used to it, because then you've trained your customers and your people to just look what Amazon does. Amazon tells you constantly that the price is changing or the price changes or whatever. It doesn't hide it. And yet they sell more goods than anyone else on the planet. How does that make sense? Even if the price goes up, people still buy it. So here's the thing. One is you have to communicate it. And what do I mean? I don't need to say I'm increasing my prices or decreasing my prices, but I need to put it up on a menu or in a digital form or online constantly. Okay. And if you watch McDonald's, they do this. They change their prices on a regular basis. It may be pennies, it may be up and down pennies, but there is a change in their pricing, okay, especially regionally. The reason that this is important is because it doesn't allow there to be the shock value of the prices. So if I walk into a restaurant and a lobster roll is $62, I'm in shock because it must have jumped from $42, okay? But if I went there and it only jumped $3, uh, okay, well, they might be doing well because lobster prices I hear are going way up, but they're still holding their price. But the reason is they adjusted on the way up, because the truth is lobster did go like this. It's just there's been a lot of time here that we could have adjusted along the way. So that's just I love this topic because of this. Pricing and consumer ability to absorb it, get comfortable with it, has everything to do with how often we make them uncomfortable. So if we do it quarterly, then there's no more discomfort because they got used to it. Look at McDonald's, people still line up. It doesn't matter what the price is. People are paying a special $3.99 for 20 McNuggets this day, and then the next day they're paying $15.99 for the same 20 nuggets, even though they paid $3.99 here yesterday and it was on special on $15.99 here. Why? Because McDonald's has got us used to that they one, they discount their food, but two, that they adjust based on the quarter, based on time. So you don't know what it is, but you do know that the price is either going to be cheaper, discounted on a sale, or you do know that they increase the price. It's not going to be that much compared to the last time you were there, because they don't change their prices that much, but they do it often. So they're fixing it. So sometimes the prices go down and they share that. So that's, the willingness there is also you have to be honest with your customers. If I'm saving the money, maybe it doesn't all go in my pocket. Maybe I don't give it all back to them, because in case the price goes up, I don't want to get close to too low, but I need to give some back because the customer deserves it and they're owed it and they work hard for their money. And so that being said, keeping the cost of your products on a regular basis and doing the cost analysis and having a format that's set up that you can just input your numbers in, or inventory or your shipping slip from Shamrock or US Foods or Cisco or PFG or Vistar, whoever you're getting your stuff from, is important, and that you do it on a regular basis, a monthly, if not quarterly basis. Because if you don't, things like milk or lobster, or they'll be your death. It'll be one product that'll take you down overnight. Trust me. One product fluctuates too much, or during 2008, all of a sudden the Obama administration paid everyone to stop using milk cows because milk was too cheap. We needed the price up, and cow farts and all the other things. But what people did is they got rid of their milk cows, so milk went up. And instead of getting rid of cows that was supposed to happen, they just bought meat cows. So then beef prices went down. So we had this scenario where milk went through the roof, and anyone who's making 300 gallons worth of soup with 2% or milk like we were, your prices went through the roof. And now all of a sudden we're not profiting across the board because we're making massive amounts of soup, sauces, creams for the healthcare across the globe. Okay. Then we have beef that bottoms out. Well, beef, well, that's great. It bottomed out because of all the beef cows that suddenly emerged. The problem is in my scenario, I use way more milk than I use beef. Chicken, turkey, leaner meats, more healthier on the gut if you're in the hospital business. So what did that do? That meant I had 2 quarters of loss because the jump in milk was so high. It took me 2 quarters to deliver that increase to the customers properly, to get them to even agree, get them even to pay it in the contract food business. Okay, same with gasoline. If you're in, like, gasoline prices go through the roof. Are you shipping? Are you delivering? What is that doing to your costs? Are you playing a surcharge in your invoice that you're not accounting for gasoline and diesel fuel right now? Because if you are, it should be accounted and broken out in your invoice, but across all your food evenly, and then applied into your food costs. It shouldn't be counted separately. It's part of that food cost, that diesel fuel, that gasoline. That's my advice, because in those little details, and as Jack Reacher TV show says, details matter. In those details is where you lose your business. Honestly, you don't. No one steals $7 million. People steal pennies, and then it accumulates over time, or dollars, or whatever. Or in this case, you're losing it because you're not accounting for it properly. You're losing that diesel fuel. You should be recovering it from your customers by putting in your cost to inventory or ingredients, period. So sorry, Barry, I went down a path there.
That's okay. You're giving your listeners good advice,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, as I've learned over the decades, despite their best intentions, there's always the shit always hits the fan, not always, but often does, and there's always a bankruptcy or some sort of, creative way to keep them in business.
Yeah.
Uh, the real question, like we hit on a few times, is they have to analyze what's going on and know what reality. I can take as many drugs as I want, but there's still reality. And
Yeah.
the only thing I find is to give examples. Many decades ago, I represented a some sort of industrial company in Worcester in a Chapter 11. And when you're in a Chapter 11, you have to file cash flow statements to show what's going on. And, you're paying your taxes every week or month, whatever's, they don't want you to go further in arrears. And at that time, he was a great judge. Since he retired many decades ago, but if you said, Your Honor, I'd like to file a brief, he would take it under advisement for months. And I'm visiting the debtor, and I'm looking at his cash flow statements, and they're going like this. But he's telling me business is great. Well, he didn't have to pay his secured creditors. He wasn't paying his taxes, and the judge wasn't closing him down. So of course business was great, but the numbers just showed us like, what do you mean business is great? You have no revenues.
Yeah, business is great when you're still stacking up debt. I will say that as entrepreneurs, and I've been guilty of this myself, we have a tendency to not look at things, the debts, the expenses when times are stressful, because we don't want to know what the number is or what
Right.
we're racking up, because it can be defeating. It can be take away your pride and stuff like that. But I don't. I've had to learn this. The thing you're most afraid of is the thing you have to go face first and with the most fierceness. And that's often the money, guys.
It's
You know,
and it and the thing is, very often debtors decide to play ostrich. They stick their heads in the sand. It's all gonna go away. Not gonna answer the certified mail. I'm gonna ignore the summons but it doesn't, and it needs to be dealt with. I mean,
agreed.
it's not a good situation, but ignoring it only makes it worse.
Yeah. I think that that's great advice, and I think we're all guilty of it at some point in our lives right now. Student debt, credit cards, things we
Well, like
do, or
I tell you,
we lend
student
for business.
loans now, when people would come to me with a lot of student loans, I would say, pick a bus, walk in front of it, and that's how you're going to discharge them. But recently, the feds changed their guidelines, and I've had several cases where they've discharged the student loans. They look at the age of the loan, the borrower's good faith, whether the degree, if they got a degree, has anything to do with what they're currently doing, and if they've enrolled in these IDF income derived payment plans and things, and they are discharging them in bankruptcy. It's not the end of the world
Interesting.
anymore.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
I
yeah,
find that it's having to deal with things, and I've had to do it myself. Whether it's through divorce or through businesses selling or closing or bankrupt. You At the end of the day, personally, it does add up. That's why I've given the advice that I've given, guys, because I've learned the lessons. I've seen the things in areas in business for a reason. We make mistakes as entrepreneurs.
we
That's
we
part of
learn expensive lessons. That's
Yes.
what I've learned in life.
Yeah, forget, when I talk about student loans, it wasn't the $200,000 MBA at University of North Carolina, one MBA program. It had cost me a lot, but really the most of the lessons came in life, especially losing. No different in sport. We learn more when we lose than when we win, unfortunately. But you wanna be able to have the losses without losing the business. That's important, guys, and that's why
And that takes
you
planning.
yeah, it takes planning, and like I said, it takes making sure you have some sort of income constantly coming in the business in some way, even if it's 50, $100, whatever it is at the beginning, just to start stacking the money. You need to get used to setting it aside to support the business, because at the beginning, I don't know any entrepreneurs that haven't worked at the beginning of their business, multiple jobs to keep their business alive, or their wife worked or whatever to support them. But if you're under the mindset that I'm gonna start this business and it's gonna be my only job, then 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 I don't know what to tell you. I just don't there's no capacity for it or whatever. You'll have to handle it differently.
Get the
So
name of a good bankruptcy attorney.
yeah, exactly. So, Barry, for the audience, let's talk a little bit about, you building a law firm because it hasn't been easy. You've had to build it yourself. You build a business. It's only your name on it.
It
Let's
well,
talk about this a little bit.
when you retain, it's just me. I
Yeah.
don't have. I have my assistant Kathy, and we've been busy because bankruptcies. It's been for the last 2 years has been busier than in the prior 40. It's crazy. Um, something. I think I built my business to spite myself. I don't can't put to anything in any one thing that I've done. I used to seek out Chapter 11s. Now I do mostly consumer bankruptcies. I do a decent amount of marketing now. If this stuff existed 45 years ago, it'd be a different world, but it didn't. And, word of mouth, uh, and I'm known. In the area, I'm one of the sole practitioners. I didn't become a debtor's attorney when bankruptcy became busy. I've been doing it for 45 years.
Yeah.
I find that people are just coming to me word of mouth, organically, I guess you would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's no better method, right? So,
You know, like I said, nowadays I have my podcasts. I rail about debt settlement companies and stuff like that. Uh, because it is a different world, marketing wise. Back when I started, lawyers didn't market. It wasn't like Florida where they have the signs on the benches and things like
Yeah.
that.
We have that in Colorado
And
too.
I'm sure, now Morgan& and Morgan is everywhere, you know,
Yeah.
but, small guys, I still encounter situations where, you know, clients would rather go to a big Boston firm and pay them a hell of a lot more money than use me. But I've reached the point in my life where I have enough cases, it doesn't bother me. You know,
Yeah.
it's like go in good health.
Mm. One of the things I've learned about the legal world, just for the audience also, and accounting and picking your partners is necessarily, and I say this because it's important, you wanna side or hire the person that has the best relationships within that environment, okay? It doesn't mean you don't want someone who's a bulldog, you don't want someone who's gonna fight, okay? Because I get it. You want someone that's going to stick up for you and you need it. But in the case of the scenario that we're looking at here, you need someone who's logical and can maneuver and has the relationships to get through the scenario. It's a
And
business
you
dealing.
also, as debtors counsel, you have to come up with a good story.
Yeah.
Like I said before, we're always taking a step back and a step to the side. The few times I represent my creditors, it's like I want my money and I want it now. Most cases it's the judge saying, "Why has your client not paid their mortgage in 6 months?" when they're in a Chapter 13. And
Yeah.
well, could happen. And, I said, having done it for 45 years, you get tired of the bullshit. You get tired of making excuses. I really, that's the one thing that drives me. I've reached the point where, it's like the dog ate my homework. I've even, almost, like had a case. I filed a Chapter 11 just to jerk around the foreclosure. And the judge finally realized after 9 months we were trying to sell the house, nothing was going on, and sort of issued an order to show cause. And it's like, what can I tell you? That's the way it works, and you go with the situation. It's, if you want to do litigation, which I won't go near litigation, my feeling is the only ones who make any money are the lawyers who do the litigation. And as a client, you're usually not satisfied with the result, or you've spent thousands, tens of thousands of dollars and are not satisfied with the
Yeah.
result. But you need somebody, litigation, litigators have their litigation book and all this stuff. I mean, uh, you need somebody who's going to be aggressive. Me, I know that this pen is worth a certain amount of money. You can argue with me all day about it, but it's only worth, and that's how the bankruptcy, I tell people, when you deal with debtors counsel, it's strictly dollars and cents.
Yeah.
You'll hear stories. I remember years ago there was a story about, you know, somebody went bankrupt and he kept his $10 million condominium. What the article didn't say is the $10 million condominium was subject to a $15 million mortgage. Trustees, did you ever play basketball when you were younger? The kid who couldn't play, but it was his ball
Yeah.
and didn't let him play, he'd take the ball home. Trustees don't sell property just for the hell of it. They only want to make money. Like I now, it happens to be, it's going to be a movie. A kid is in a Chapter 7 and he's the proud owner of 1,807 Bitcoins. Don't ask. And the Bitcoins are being held by somebody who claims he's the custodian and won't turn them over. From a bankruptcy point of view, and his estate with 1,807 Bitcoin is what, $170 million maybe.
Yeah.
The total of his debt is $5 million. Who has control of the Bitcoin in that case? The debtor or the trustee? It's going to be a movie.
I know, but and as someone who understands the trust trust things very thoroughly now, and about the last year, I understand why people handle it and hire trustees, especially when you have a lot of money, or it's just and adding that buffer there from a personal standpoint.
Well,
Um,
how he came to the Bitcoin is the guy who's the custodian found it on his computer because my client was the victim of identity theft. And the guy who stole his identity used his laptop to run $35 million through it. And I guess he liked to buy Bitcoin.
Interesting.
Like I said, it's a fascinating story.
I mean, if that's not a weird kind of like God making things right for the person who got his life ruined, I don't know what. But at the end of the day, $5 million is a lot of debt to rack up for sure.
Well, nowadays, you want to know something? It really isn't. Especially
Interesting.
if you're, he liked was a developer, did condo conversions and stuff like that, and when the real estate market soured, the sales didn't come to pass. So you're
You
on the
know, they
hook,
have all the money locked up into assets and
and there's
but
no equity, and you're on the hook for a personal guarantee. You know.
yeah, in that case, yes, I know the personal guarantees that can add up to 3 million, 5 million, ten
Yeah,
million.
no, that's ultimately, the business is one thing, but it's the personal guarantee. You can liquidate a business and start a business and liquidate a business. You can go on and on, but the personal guarantees, there's only two ways to get rid of them. Well, three. The statute of limitations expires, maybe generally 6 years on a contract. You offer them some money to settle, which you probably don't have and they're probably going to borrow. So why do that? Or you file discharging in a bankruptcy. Those are your real choices. And the trouble with again getting back to your listeners is that people who are optimistic will cut deals based on money they don't have. Like I cut a deal for a client who owes a supplier money and says, I'll pay them in full in 2 months. And I'll say, that's bullshit and not going to happen. Let me get a year payout. And if you come in 2 months and happen to pay them off, you're a hero. But people say, oh no, no problem. The check will be here next week. Never comes.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's like if you deal with contractors, it's like contractors waiting for their retainage. They sit in the guy's office waiting for the check. They never get the check. Guy goes out.
Mhm.
Like I said, the best analogy is you're in a battle.
Yeah,
The predators aren't your friends in the final analysis. And one of the phrases we use all the time is "no good deed goes unpunished."
yeah, I agree with that for sure. Um, and we have a tendency to think that because our perception of putting good in the world or whatever we think is good will protect us, but that's not the case, guys. At the end of the day, numbers is the original universal language, and we just talked about accounting. No matter what way we look at it, we are sized, we are determined, we are weighted in our life, and we have to be able to ride it through, and if you're gonna take the risk, you just have to be prepared that, bankruptcy or things like this are
And
possible.
one other thing I'd like to add,
Because when we ignore it, we tend to run right into it, I don't know why.
you're
That's the
right,
whole thing.
and if they're opening up a business, they should look to do business with a bank that is local, doesn't have branches nationwide. Because when you deal with the bank, see, again, I look at everything from a defensive point of view. If you deal with a bank where I'm at Bank of America in Massachusetts, but Bank of America has a branch in California, your creditor can get an attachment on your bank account in California against your Bank of America account.
Yeah.
Whereas if you use a local bank that has two branches, they got to come to you.
Yeah,
Again, it's all part of thinking. Yeah,
I like it. Barry, I appreciate your time,
Yeah, I'm glad.
this
Yeah, and you give
audience.
your people very good advice, I have to tell you.
I
Sounds like you've been
appreciate
through it yourself, but,
yeah, yeah. No, it's advice that I had to learn myself for sure, and
only
some of
way
it
to
I
do it.
got from others, but most of it is just we live in a new world now. I don't know how else to tell everyone that in the a human entrepreneur, you have to be different. You have to adapt and you have to change, and the old school way of doing things just isn't the way anymore. And if you want to guarantee loss and bankruptcy, keep doing things the way that you're doing them right now. It's
Well, it's
because
best to have independently wealthy parents. I did
yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. So, but even then, if you try to do a business and you don't have your stuff, you're just going to run
You
through
just lose their money.
exactly. So, I mean, I that's to be careful. That's why I said make sure you can capitalize your own businesses if you guys can. Don't rely on your family. It's great and you want to help out your family. But the best thing to do if you want to help your family is to give them money or their kids money or access to loan against a trust after you pass, where you put your money in and then you put it into a legacy trust or a dynasty trust and benefit them in the long run. People that you benefit in the short run generally don't deserve it, and they don't appreciate it. And you haven't had the money long enough to think about the proper hooks that should be in place before people can have it. Okay. You're giving something. It is borrowing money. We do get to borrow it when we do have a lot of it, but it comes with the responsibility of being able to give it back in a responsible way. Okay. If you don't do it in a responsible way, it's just going to make your family legacy worse and it's going to make your life worse. Honestly, it's going to make the employee's life worse if you give away too much or you're too kind. That's one. And number two is if you want to take care of people, take care of their children, take care of the future. That's the best way to do it because in the immediate, we haven't had the time to process, we haven't had the time to grow, and we haven't had the time to think about how we should properly and responsibly give things away or entitle things. So that's why I say it, guys. I love my family, and we did business for a lot of years together, and my family's involved now. But at the end of the day, as I move forward in life, my family will benefit from what's left behind in the generations versus now. And the reason that is because I've learned myself what too much now means or the instant um, money tree, I'll call it growing money, and what it does to those around you and expectations and work ethics and to family members and legacy. So that's why it has to be thought out and it has to be paused. And you should talk to a bankruptcy attorney before you ever even start a business. I'm serious about that. If I had done that, I would have saved myself a lot of heartache. And now that I've been through them, in a few cases, um, I've learned from them. And the information that I have now has built the businesses that I've started building over the last 4 years in ways that are different that I would consider indestructible as possible, including financially, meaning that idea of self-capitalizing is not only everyone else. I've done it now. I went and worked other jobs to make sure there wasn't only the money coming into the business, but I was self-capitalizing and putting money into what I would call a line of credit that we could use at any time across any of the businesses. And why is that? Why don't I just take what I did before and just leverage that into what's now? Because I don't believe that I'm learning if I'm not. One of the things that life has forced me to do by starting over and the way that I have in business and rebuilding businesses or going after contract businesses is that I've been given the time to think over the last 4 years, to spend a little time in seminary, to learn from others in their businesses in the hotel business or in the grocery store business. And so learning while also capitalizing the businesses is a huge advantage. I recommend it to anyone. Your family's going to have to understand. You're going to have to understand. You're going to be working 80 hours, 90 hours a week, but there's no other way right now to ensure success, and even then, you're not ensuring it, but you are at least assuring the capital to give yourself the time needed to pivot and adjust if you have the ability to self-reflect to grow your business. And if you come in your business with a business plan or you have an idea and you stick to it, you're gonna fail, guys. Most businesses do not start off what they are. Nintendo was a trading card company. Okay, look what they do now. I think Nokia invented record players or something. Okay. Samsung was something like easily as basic. Okay. These companies, BMW didn't make cars, neither did Mercedes. So we have to understand that what we started out to do is just the beginning. It's not necessarily the ending or where we need to be. So, in order to do that, we need to give ourselves time, as Barry said, financially. Just like we would do in a bankruptcy, the same mindset actually has to be our entire existence as a business. We should always be thinking about the bankruptcy point. We should always be thinking about what it takes as a business to run bankruptcy free, not debt free, not
Right.
not profiting. I understand all the financial statements, the three major ones, and how important they are. But there should be a fourth one, which is what is my breaking point always at any given moment? And what does that look like? That should be my fourth financial assessment every single week, month, whatever you feel. I do it weekly. What is my breaking point? At which point am I going to have to close the businesses if we don't have XYZ, and when? And how close am I to that right now? How close am I to that right now? Okay? And no one wants to think about that because no one wants to think about the end, but your life will be much fuller, guys. You will use your time more effectively. You will run your business more effectively. You will spend time with your family more effectively, and you will run your personal health, spirituality, emotion, physical, mental in a much better way because you're now under this idea that time is limited, that a business has a shelf life. We have a shelf life. The food we produce has a shelf life. And when we understand that and we understand how do we get rid of the shelf life? Well, in food, just because something lasts 45 days isn't really its shelf life. If I continue to serve that meal to a customer that keeps coming in the door over and over again, what is really the shelf life of that product now? Okay. If I'm paying my bills and I'm always working and making sure there's capital in my business, what's the shelf life of my business now? Okay. And if I'm investing in the humans and I'm investing in everyone around me, the vendors included, the suppliers, the customers, I'm building relationships and I'm allowing a conversation to happen where we build our businesses together. That maybe I do business and align my business with people that are in similar situations that I'm in. So we have each other. So if there is an emergency, hey, Bill, I need 90 more days to pay my bill because we're doing business. Can you help me out? And Bill can be like, "Yeah, but I'm gonna charge you 50 cents per pound more in the meantime to cover the load." Okay, deal. I don't need to worry about it because I built a relationship with someone that's in a similar situation that's not a giant corporation like a Bank of America or a Cisco or whatever. And if I'm going local, I now build a relationship that gives us a lot of room, guys, to keep our businesses alive, those points I just made. The other thing I will say lastly, and I think whether Barry, jokingly about it or not, is Barry at the beginning of his life had a work ethic and a commitment to do it no matter whether he had the experience or the degree or not. And that is the difference, guys. That's the last piece is the willingness to push ourselves. We are not bullshitting. I don't want anyone to think that we are not doing something that is against something. We are taking the steps necessary with the information under the guidance of a mentor that allows us to go forward and risk. It's discomfort, but it's in a safe environment. And that's the importance of where Barry learned. It's the importance of where I learned while I was a young entrepreneur at 18 years old, starting a business at a basement. My father was there with me the entire way, mentoring me and coaching me and teaching me lessons. Okay. And in life, when we outgrow our mentors, we need to find other ones who can still humble us and keep us on the straight path. That's the other part of not going bankrupt. Always be around someone who's either been bankrupt before or run a business for more than 2 decades at least. And why do I say that? You need to be through at least one or two or three crises that have nothing to do with you. Okay. COVID, not my fault. Financial crisis, not my fault. 9/11, not my fault. However, whether or not my business survives those things is my fault. Okay. Did I build a strong enough business to last the discomfortable periods, uncomfortable periods? Did I train my employees during the comfortable times to be discomfortable, to be uncomfortable and live in discomfort, to handle the 9/11s, the COVIDs, all that. And here's the honest truth, guys. If I hadn't been through Katrinas and hurricanes in New York City and earthquakes in California and all those things and fires and Florida hurricanes and Georgia hurricanes and all those crazy crises, COVID would have destroyed our business. Maybe in some ways it did, but it didn't because the employees all kept going no matter what, because in some way, shape, and form, they had all been through it in a microcosm at some point in time. Okay. So that's my last thing for everyone. Preparing for bankruptcy means you're preparing the employees always for a crisis. And when they're in the crisis, it doesn't feel like crisis to them because we've already trained them to be there. Why do Navy SEALs train for 18 months, 2 years before they ever go into battle comparatively to anyone else? Why? Because every circumstance needs to be like they've been there before. It needs to be natural. And that's what we're talking about for our employees. Every circumstance should be prepared. You should do fire drills. You should purposely short inventory. Where people are like, what? Purposely short inventory. Yes, make an uncomfortable situation with a customer on purpose. That seems crazy, but you should do it. And then work on with that employee how to recover a customer and make that customer a lifetime customer. Okay. So sometimes we need to test things. We need to do things on purpose to do that. I used an extreme example. I don't recommend negatively affecting the customer, but I used it as an example for everyone to understand because the shorting of the inventory, if that really happens, it should never make it to the customer. If we have a proper system, if it made it to the customer, the problem is we didn't fix the problem before it made it to the customer. Okay. Or address it or have a plan. So Barry, the show is yours. I'm going to let you end it. Let you add anything you want about your book, about your practice, about life. But
Well,
I appreciate.
I okay, like I said earlier, I'm just an old hippie who practices law. I have a very good relationship with our my clients. The very important thing to me is I assuage their concerns when they come in and talk to me about bankruptcy.
Yeah,
And when you get down to it, hopefully health is perfect, then it's only money when you get down to it. The
yeah,
creditors, they'll survive.
yeah,
And the entrepreneurs, everybody survives. You can't y you can't let it eat at you. That's really the thing.
yeah.
If anybody wants to watch my podcast, I rail about debt settlement companies and all this other stuff, and, my book happens to be pretty good too because, it really gives you the reality of filing a bankruptcy. If this was a 341 meeting, this is how I'd be dressed. In the summertime, I'd probably be wearing a T-shirt that says, "I saw Jerry" on it.
Yeah,
But,
love it.
the best is when they're done with the 341 meeting and they had to wait 20 minutes, but the meeting took 3. They said, "Was that it?" And I say, "Yeah, that's it." And life goes on.
Yeah, I think simplicity is good, Barry, and I think from your point of view of the hippie that practices law, it's the simplification that's your success.
I hate to say it's bankruptcy. It's not like doing heart surgery. I do that on weekends. I got my Google degree in medicine. So if you want to visit
Yeah, there you go.
side and, you need a little incision. But no, exactly. It's, from a difficulty point of view, it would be a concern if a debtor or your listeners have assets that are not exempt.
Yeah,
That's what requires bankruptcy planning, is how do they not lose assets and go through a bankruptcy?
yeah. And
And
honestly,
they can say,
it's I swear to you, it's like a piano fell over my head because, ever since I've been through this, my businesses are built way differently. And they're the way they're built, the way I've structured, the way I finance them, the way I break them out into pieces,
that's the
um,
best part.
is because of what I've learned. And that's why I encourage everyone. Barry's right here. He's on the show. He has a book. That's why he went on here. And just to be transparent with the audience, when everyone comes or people present individuals to be on the show, generally it's food, as everyone sees, or something to do with it. When Barry came on, they're like, I know you may not want to talk to him, but actually, the response was just the opposite. I think Barry's probably the most important person that we've had on the show from the very reason of that the infrastructure of your business, your operating agreements, your formation agreements, if you sign a formation agreement before an operating agreement, your appendices to the operating agreement, your supplier agreements, your if you're financing yourself, what are you financing it, and is it messing with equity, or are you just giving it as a loan at the standard 8%? And so, how are you handling it? The reason you do that is because when you understand a bankruptcy and the way everything's broken out, it's not logical to us. It's logical to a system that needs to account for the money. Okay. As an entrepreneur, we don't have the same logic as someone else who hasn't built a business. The legal system is not a group of entrepreneurs, it is a group of accountants and lawyers that are trying to make sense of what we did and then do it properly. So, what's the best thing to do? Make it make sense from day one for you and for them, and then make it indestructible by building it in a way that keeps it alive that we've talked about. I've given way a lot of information here, guys, for free. Like I would charge a lot of money to a consulting company for this. Like in all honesty, if I really reflect, this is more than I would have given. But again, it's because it's the most important thing. And if I were consulting with someone or helping someone build a business or even franchise their business, we would go back to this step and we would actually restructure their business legally. And if I were to be perfectly honest with you, everyone in the audience, and I've never said this before, in most cases, I will not move forward in a partnership or in an investment until the business has been legally restructured to properly handle these things because I do know what the ugly looks like in the end. And I do know what death looks like for a business. And it's way worse than death for a human. And when you're dead as a human, you don't know any different. As a business, you're still alive dealing with the dead thing. Okay. So that is what I'm saying. You just need to lay it out and the best money spent, and I know there's formation attorneys and business attorneys and all that. You need to get that advice, but I recommend going backwards through the process, not forwards. Don't start and, oh, here and I'm celebrating I formed an LLC. No, what is it going to look like if what businesses, what happens to them if I fail, then let me go build the businesses. Okay. That's how we should do everything in life, in my opinion. But I'm different. And Barry says he's a pessimist. I play the optimist, okay, because I'm a leader and I'm a business person. I lead in the world. But in general, I am very much the glass half full type of person. And I don't like negativity around me at all because I have enough inside of me to think about all the negative aspects of the problem before I even bring it to someone where you're now repeating to me what I've already thought of. Okay. Am I being disrespectful? Am I not addressing your concern? And I'm saying negative, even though I've already said it. Does it make me hypocritical? Possibly. But if you're the leader of your business, you need to keep them optimistic and you need to be the one that's pessimistic dealing with the problems. Keep the people optimistic, keep you pessimistic. That means, yes, I'm negative. Yes, I'm being a hypocrite as a leader. Yes, I'm doing those things. But at the end of the day, I need the people to keep moving. I need them to keep being excited about the work, them keep doing their job properly, making sure I keep giving them the tools they need to succeed because I'm so paranoid about what they might not have that I'm doing it. Okay. And I'm going to leave this with everyone. One of the points in a hotel that I've recently been in the management styles. Okay. People argue management styles, no matter what it is, as long as it's successful, it's a good style. Okay. I don't know what that measure is or whatever. And I hear that a lot in the corporate world. But here's the truth. There's a difference between an organized manager who breaks apart his days and his weeks to analyze his problems and a manager who just deals with the problems as they come. Okay. What is the difference? One is life is managing me, the other is I'm managing life. Okay. Let's go back to what I talked about with Barry and the thing. Either I let the money own me or I own the money. Okay, what do I mean? The money owns me or I manage the money. Okay. How do I manage the money? I make sure that what happens, what does the end look like? What is the worst case scenario, break even, loss, however you want to run your report. But you need to figure it out from day one as part of your cash flow your balance sheet and your income statements or P&Ls, whatever you want to call it. So the reason being is because I need to have that fourth financial statement in my pocket at all times. Why? Because we just heard from Barry that the last 2 years have been busier than the last 45 years. That means statistically, no matter how good you are, that whatever is going on, that the statistics are against you, period. And if you don't pay attention to the numbers don't lie. That's why the money matters. That's why it all matters. And it shouldn't control you, but you need to manage it. But look at the statistics. And if you don't want to end up in bankruptcy, go to the bankruptcy first and then work your way backwards to build your business. That is my advice for everyone. That is the way that I live my life now, over the last 4 years in particular, considering the knowledge I've gained over the last 7 years ish. But until you've gone through a bankruptcy or you've been through something as a business, I don't think you understand. And I don't know that personal people, other than just the relief of not having the debt, actually learn the lesson from the experience. So if you're going to go through it, learn the lesson. If you don't want to go through it, learn the lesson as if you're going through it and then work your way as hard as possible not to go through it. There's no guarantees in life, period. But I can lessen the percentages in my favor by doing the work. And this is my last point. Why did I say the 16 hours a day? Why did I say the 80 hours a week? Because here's the truth, guys. And this is the truth for me. I worked 80 hours, my majority of my, when I wasn't at work, I was at home working. I couldn't stop. And then I was working out or coaching or doing whatever. But the reality is this: if for every week you put in, I'm putting in two, equivalent. So every month that goes by, I've now done 2 months worth of work and growth, and you've done one. Okay. Now imagine I work 100 hours. I'm not saying to push yourself to unhealthy levels. You need to gain capacity. You need to go from 40 to 50 to 50 to 60, 60 to 70, like anything else. It's a mental, physical capacity, or it will kill you. I'm not kidding. But in order to do that, you need to start now. All right. And in order to do that, you need to go back and take some of this 10, 11 hours of capacity. If you're already an entrepreneur and you're just starting to be an entrepreneur, you need to go back and restructure your business, possibly. And you need to go back and have a conversation with a bankruptcy attorney. Okay. By bringing the fear and the monster out of the closet and addressing it now, you already have it handled. You have it managed. You will never have control over it. Let's not pretend. Like I said, we don't know ever, but we do have the ability to take action, to grow ourselves, to gain capacity in managing it. Okay. Like I said, money can own us, but we can't own it, because when we try to own it, it gets control over us and it owns us. So we're back to where we started. But managing it, understanding that it's never mine, it's just temporarily mine. And I've been gifted with more of it to keep in jobs, to keep employees' kids going through college, to keep employees' lights on, to keep whatever, vendors, you name it. If we really think about it, we should be weighing not the money at the end of the day, but how many jobs did I create in my business through the chain? And then maybe we would look at the money less as a trophy and more like something that we are accomplishing for a greater good. Because when we repost it in our minds, it's less about needing to be successful and it's more about growing the individuals. And what did I say the best thing to do to make sure your business is not going bankrupt? Pivot, put people in place that matter, empower people, give them ownership. So if I'm doing that, then I've now guaranteed two things. I've done the homework on bankruptcy, I already know it, and now I'm also empowering the people to keep the business alive. So if I have to go do something else to put money into the business, I can do that. So I've been long-winded this call, guys, and I appreciate your patience, Barry, but I don't know of a more important podcast that we've discussed right now in the world with the bankruptcy on a world level, particularly in food, particularly in a changing environment that we're going through. This has been the most important call for us recently. So thank you, Barry. I appreciate your time.
My
And I
pleasure.
everyone read the book. I was reading snippets of it, as we were doing this call, just so I had information, but I'm pretty impressed, Barry. It's well done.
Thank
I
you.
wish everyone had it. I would call it everyone should buy Bankruptcy Through the Looking Glass as one of your entrepreneurial 101 classes. You should know it. You should understand it. You should understand what your vulnerabilities are. Because in the end, like Barry said, if you make certain decisions or you, what I would say is confess and make amends, even with the government, life is better for you versus avoiding it. And no different than is biblical in the first book of the Bible. When we hide from things, life gets a lot worse. If we cannot hide from our problems, we cannot hide from the world, and the truth always comes out. So that being said, to Barry's point, don't avoid things. Don't kick the can down the road. Don't just temporarily stick your finger in the dam. Um, Deal with your problems, deal with them in real life and grow from them, and like I said, I've been one that I deal with things on and off my plate very quickly. Those are the best years of my life, best decades of my life. In some weird years here and there as life got stressful and I dragged things on, those were the worst years for me. And as employees are a reflection of leadership, when I'm not doing my stuff well, my employees aren't doing their stuff well because they're a reflection of me as a leader. So that's what I have for everyone. Thank you, Barry. Again, anything else, Barry?
Been my pleasure. No, have a
Yeah,
good
for
day.
your time. Thank you.
I hope I gave good information.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys listening in and reach out to Barry, seriously.
Be happy to
And
chat with you. Send an email. Oh,
yeah,
here's my email address. It's
yeah, there
Barry at
you go.
levineslaw.com.
Give it to us one more time, Barry.
Barry at Levine's Law, like levineslaw.com.
Perfect. For being sly. I like it. That's a good one from a food perspective. Thank you guys. I love you guys, and we're
Stay
out.
well, everybody. Bye.